UFOs, cryptids, unsolved mysteries, megalithic structures, extraterrestrials, interdimensional portals, time skips, and more. Don't change that channel, because now you are leaving the mainstream and entering into the fringe.
Greetings, followers. It is I, Cardinal Sin. And tonight we have a very special episode of Into the Fringe with legendary investigators into the paranormal, David Perkins and Christopher O'Brien. David Perkins, a writer/journalist and a 1968 graduate of Yale, has researched paranormal events for nearly 40 years. Perkins has tentatively concluded that such events are modern manifestations of the supernatural with roots in humanity's deepest archaic past. David Perkins has been analyzing the strange phenomenon of cattle mutilation for decades. In his modest quest to formulate a unified field theory or theory of everything to understand paranormal phenomena, Perkins has observed, if you're not confused, you're not thinking clearly. In his presentations, Perkins reviews and critiques the terms exotic theories and those that have been put forth by several of the foremost cutting-edge theorists. Perkins debates the pros and cons of his own evolutionary imperative provisional theory, first proposed in the 1980s. Perkins' current research focuses on the possible biological role that various paranormal phenomena, such as UFOs, cattle mutilations, and cryptids, may play in either the conscious or unconscious formulation of human species survival strategies. David Perkins' presentations have been specifically prepared for insatiably curious minds, so you can get it straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Christopher O'Brien. From 1992 to 2002, Christopher O'Brien has investigated over 1,000 paranormal events reported in the San Luis Valley, located in south-central Mexico, north-central New Mexico. Working with law enforcement officials, ex-military, ranchers, and an extensive network of skywatchers, he documented what may have been the most intense wave of unexplained activity ever seen in a single region of North America. His 10-year investigation resulted in the 3 books of his Mysterious Valley trilogy, The Mysterious Valley, Enter the Valley, and Secrets of the Mysterious Valley. His meticulous field investigation of UFO reports, unexplained livestock deaths, haunted sites, Native American legends, cryptozoology, secret military activity and folklore, found in the world's largest alpine valley, has produced one of the largest databases of unusual occurrences gathered from a single geographic region. He is currently working with a team of specialists installing a high-tech video surveillance and hard data monitoring system in and around the San Luis Valley. His latest book, Stalking the Herd, published by Adventures Unlimited Press, has been called the most important book ever written, examining our relationship with cattle and how this has manifested into the modern cattle mutilation mystery. Welcome, Christopher O'Brien, and hopefully soon, David Perkins, to Inside Into the Fringe.
Yeah, poor David. He was told by SteamYard that he had to get Chrome for his browser. So he got it, and he went to try to get on the show, and it told him he needed to get Chrome as a browser.
Yeah, it's the Mac thing.
Yeah, well, I want to lodge a formal complaint to the FCC or to
Well,
to
we're not
Bill
controlled by
Gates.
the FCC on YouTube,
I
so.
know.
Um,
I couldn't think of anybody else.
but please lodge away. I'm sure we'd all be happy to have you do that.
Yeah,
So let's go ahead and dive right in, Chris.
yeah.
Can you tell us? I mean, first of all, you know that we have kind of an intermediate audience, so you don't have to go over all the details. And of course,
Right,
we've had you on several times before.
right.
But could you give us a summary, beginning with the Snippy the horse case, whose real name was Lady?
Yeah. Well, it doesn't quite work that way. It's like talking about UFOs and saying, well, we need to start at Kenneth Arnold. Although Snippy was an international news story, that's the first time a slain head of livestock, the word of its death circled the globe. That made the case in many ways unique. I mean, I saw it on a cover of the Enquirer in Bellevue, Washington, in 1967 as a little kid, and I just I just badgered my mom so much to give me 50 cents or whatever for the magazine, and she did. And I read the story of this horse who had been horribly mutilated. All the flesh was taken from the tip of its nose down to its neck to the shoulders. The mane was gone, the skin, the hide, the connective tissue, the muscles. It looked like it had been dipped in a vat of acid. The bones were kind of a ghostly white color, like they'd been in the sun for 30 years, even though the animal had only been dead for less than 24 hours. That particular case is quite notable, but the earliest outbreak of cases that I could find was actually written down in the court records of James I, evidently right when he got in as the king in 1605.
About what year?
1605.
Wow.
There were hundreds of sheep being mutilated a night all over the London area and outside of London.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, hundreds of sheep. The tallow, some inward parts taken, but the wool and tallow left behind. Of this, sundry conjectures, but most would agree that it tended toward fireworks. Was the quote at the end of the description in the court record. So even though Snippy is an important case and it's kind of like the Roswell or Kenneth Arnold event, it is by no means the first one that's ever happened. There's outbreaks in the 1920s in Australia. There was cases in England in the 1880s, 1890s. There was a very strange wave of events in Ireland in, I think, the early 1820s. There were some cases in the upper Ohio River Valley around Gallipoli and around Montreal in 1966, the year before Snippy, for instance. So I'm not. I don't think I need to go into a lot of detail about what exactly we're talking about. Cattle mutilation. Cows make up 90% of these cases, but all kinds of animals have been found. In fact, we've just had a couple of cases of mutilated sharks off of the coast in South Africa, where these big dead great white sharks are washing up and they're missing, I think, the heart and the liver. We had a case of...
Are these in the same sort of parts
Yes.
of the body and things like that on land animals that are mutilated?
Not generally, no. But in aquatic animals, there tends to be a concentration on inward parts. And in the case of seals, we've been seeing a bunch up in the Orkneys. A bunch of seals are turning up with all the blubber missing in a spiral going down the animal from tip of its nose to its feet, and it doesn't conform to what you would think an animal would look like if it was hit by a large propeller.
How many seals are we talking about?
I'd have to go and check, but I think a dozen or so have turned up like this. We had an outbreak of dolphin mutilations. They all had the same wound around their neck. There's 50 of them that washed ashore in France.
So this isn't like what you would see in the movie The Cove.
I don't know. I've never seen the movie The Cove.
Oh, okay. It's not people trying to get at dolphin parts for their curative purposes.
No. And it may be killer whales that are doing. They're the chief suspect with the great whites down in South Africa. So
well,
anyway, I'm illustrating
really
some
puzzling.
of the other animals. A real famous case of a buffalo was inside a closed and enclosed pen, and it was found mutilated at the Cheyenne Mountain Zoo, right at the base of Cheyenne Mountain, of course, which has the NORAD underground facility, hardened facility right there. And it was autopsied by two different veterinary pathologists. Highly unusual case. We had a case of.
You said that it was located where initially?
It was in a zoo.
Oh, okay.
In a pen, a
right.
fully enclosed pen, with just a one way in, one way out, and the thing they couldn't figure out how whomever it was got in there, and all the your typical tongue, mandible exposed, rear end cord out, genitalia gone. Was your basic garden variety cattle mutilation.
I have to say, Chris, this just gets curiouser and curiouser.
Well, how about this? In Dartmouth, at their zoo in England, they had a wallaby on display, and it was found mutilated one morning. Again, similar situation to the buffalo. It was in a completely enclosed pen. And a number of months later, another wallaby was mutilated at a zoo, but in, I think, Jackson, Mississippi.
Wow.
I mean, the same, during the same 6-month time period.
It seems like just when we started to think we had it figured out, it pulls the rug out from under us in the trickster fashion.
Right. Yeah, very, very good. For every, David and I were going to talk about this at length tonight, but for every theory that you come up with based on evidence, and there's evidence to support all the theories. Some have more evidence to support them than others, but they all have enough for you to think, well, I think I might have figured it out. And as soon as you think that, it'll absolutely throw you a case that is the exact opposite of the case that convinced you of something. Let's put it this way. I've become almost inured and numbed by the irony and the paradox that comes with this particular type of mystery and research and investigation of this mystery. It's unto itself. It's the most complicated and mystery. There he is. All right.
Welcome, David.
All right. He's the man. If David can't do it, nobody can.
That was a miracle.
Well, we were just talking about the self-negating part of the mutilation phenomenon. That every theory you come up with, as soon as you think you got it figured out, the mystery bitch slaps you and gives you a case that totally negates your theory and supports another. It could be frustrating, and people actually have kind of gone a little loopy in the very small fraternity of of investigators. Um, some people just aren't built to deal with at least this particular subject. Wouldn't you say, David?
I'm still fighting the tech demons that got into this computer when we were just starting this up.
Yeah.
Hey, you're here now. That's the important thing.
It's just
and welcome to Into the Fringe, David.
Well, I'm really happy to be here in the fringe, the fridge. Into the Fridge. I always thought it was Into the Fridge. I thought it was a culinary show.
No, it's named as an homage to my friend Carla Turner after her book Into the Fringe.
Oh, there you go. There you go. Yes, indeed, Carla.
So let's dive right in, if I can speak. David, can you tell us about the book that you and Chris are working on as a follow-up to Stalking the Herd, Mute Speak, and what does the title mean?
Well, that's a very good question to start with. Mute Speak, I guess it's kind of a goofy name because mute obviously means you don't talk, and the mutilations are silent. So the idea of a mute speaking is kind of a oxymoron type thing. It's vaguely poetic. So the idea was Chris and I were going to record a long series of conversations about the mutilations, and would be us speaking. So then we're transcribing all that out and editing it down to the essentials. Some of it is really silly, so I'm not sure we want to put that out there. But it was hours and hours of every modality of consciousness.
There's a bunch of funny bits in there.
We might leave a couple of those in there, but the idea was, Gil, was to go through. Chris's book is obviously 600 some pages long, so he ran out of room there for the analysis part. So what we were attempting to do is to start at the beginning with the major theories and try to, one by one, examine them, hold them up, and look at them from every light that we could, and evaluate their pros and cons and give them some value number, maybe. It's like how plausible it is or implausible or whatever. So that was the process. So as it turns out, there's probably like 20 theories, that really need to be examined here. Closely, and they, every day I think of it another variation, some sort of other vector, So we still have our work cut out for us in trying to whittle this all down into something. But it's kind of modeled after a Terence McKenna book that he did years ago called, I think, Trilogues from the West or something like that. So it's three guys that sit down and just Rupert Sheldrake and Ralph Abraham. And they just talk through all this stuff. And it's really interesting because I'm a writer. So I'm not, when I see what I, transcribed what I've said, it's like, I would never have written that, That's not the way I write. So it's interesting to see the difference between the spoken word and the written word.
Well, and one reason I think that we've sort of leaned on that approach is it's easier to convey, I think, really complex information verbally because you go off the cues of the person that you're talking to, and you can tell whether they're understanding it or not. Right. You're not operating in a vacuum, and that give and take of a dialogue definitely at times was pulling out stuff that we'd never considered before, and I think some very important facts have been established as a result of again taking that approach of the dialogue. We're gonna have to figure out a way to get more words on a page than
Yeah.
the dialogue. That's the only problem with that.
I have a question for both or either of you. Do you think that mute speak will, in time, become an audiobook or some sort of audio format?
It would be very easy to do that. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got good quality tape, and it could be edited that way. Hey, thanks for the idea.
Sure.
What percent do you want?
Oh, just cut me in for 5.
Okay, you're good. You're good. It's an interesting. Yeah, a lot of people do absorb their information through audiobooks these days.
Yeah.
And so it'd be just the perfect thing on a long, dark highway in Colorado,
Yeah.
middle of the night.
Oh man.
And you slap that thing on there, and oh my goodness, you could spook yourself out really well.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah. I would have to say that the audiobook has reached its zenith today, and tomorrow it will be even more so. It's, as people are getting away from the written word and more toward, whatever's on their smartphone or their computer or whatever, people seem to have less time to read books. So an audiobook might be a great idea.
Well, we're such funny guys.
Yeah, we're hilarious. I mean, you just have to hang around us to see that.
Yeah.
And listen
we
to
come
us.
across this crusty old, serious, hard, hard-driven investigators, but it's just all part of the glamour, I guess. Right?
The glamour,
blood and guts, and missing body parts. It's just such a glamorous subject.
Well, that's people ask me how we've made it this long, and I say really it is through our sense of humor, because so many people have crashed and burned behind this topic.
Yeah.
I mean, really crashed and burned.
Yeah,
like
literally.
Out of here. Yeah. And people say, doesn't it kind of drive you nuts? And it could actually.
Yeah. Well, it has.
And it's driven people nuts and driven them out of the field. I mean, there's a huge list of people that have started out on this venture, and they didn't make it very far, most of them. And but the thing that gets us through, I think, is just having that lighthearted attitude about it, and having as much fun with it as possible, and keeping a sense of humor and a sense of perspective about all of it.
Yeah. Lots of irony also kind of helps, because everything is so ironic in this thing. It's so theatrical. It's so it's just dramatic in all senses of the word, and that alone is very entertaining to me, even though it's horrible. It's a horrible thing to have to deal with if you're a rancher, or maybe a deputy sheriff that gets assigned the unenviable task of adding some sort of investigation when you have a series of them. It's not fun by any means. In fact, I've often said that my least favorite thing in the world that I can think of that I've had to engage in is the worst thing is to investigate a dead, necrotic, stinking cow. It's horrible. You get used to it after a while, but it's I'd be happy if I never saw another one.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
I'd be very happy. In fact, I've
cases
been
or
moving
more.
places where they don't have them.
Yeah.
As far away as you can get from the action.
David, before you came on, Chris and I were talking about some extraordinary cattle mutilations. For instance, one that happened in a zoo, right, Chris?
Yeah, the 1975 NORAD, Cheyenne County, Cheyenne Mountain Zoo, right next to NORAD.
Was that a
Did you say it was
buffalo?
That was a buffalo,
bison?
yeah.
Yeah.
That was a bison. And then what was about 6 months later, then on the other side of the mountain, where the entrance is, they found a mutilated cow inside this perimeter security fences inside and mutilated within sight of the doorway.
That's nuts.
Yeah. Well,
I told them about the wallabies, the one in Dartmouth, England, and then 6 months later, the one in Jackson, Mississippi, or wherever the zoo was. Mutilated wallabies in enclosures.
Yeah. To which I commented, just when we thought we figured out what this, phenomenon was all about, it pulls the rug out from under us in the tricksterish fashion.
Yeah.
David, can you tell us about your work and research into the cattle mutilation mystery?
Well, sure. How many hours you got?
Hey, as long as you want to go.
Okay. To summarize it, I guess, I moved to Colorado and started building a house on a mountaintop at 9,000 feet in 1970, and lived up there full time for about 25 years, which was a great view of a lot of southern Colorado and Mount Blanca and the whole area there. It was a commune, I guess they called it then. It's this community. It's still there 53 years later, Libre. And it's a wonderful place. I go back and forth, and it's just a fantastic place to think and observe nature, which is what I really got into doing there for all those years and thinking about this kind of stuff. But that was, as the crow flies, very close to where Snippy the horse in 1967 was sort of the beginning of this phase of the mutilations. So it was right in that neighborhood. I don't think I was aware of Snippy when I moved there in 1970. And I wasn't aware of the mutilations until 75, really, which is when all hell broke loose in Colorado. And it was the story of the year, and it was headlining every newspaper. It was very sensationalist. And a lot of reports of helicopters and a few flying saucers here and there, and a lot of mutilated cows. By my count, it was at least 500. I think that's even a low count.
Yeah.
The officials, Colorado Bureau of Investigation, said 212. Or it's like, well, no, it was double that at least.
None of the ones in the valley in the SLV got counted.
Right.
I think maybe just the first few.
Yeah, I think it was probably in the thousands, really. But okay, so to summarize that, though, that of course caught my attention. At that point, I more or less finished the house that I was living in. I was like, okay, I'm a writer. I want to be a journalist now, and I need a good story to work on. I thought, here's what's up with this mutilation thing. So I'm going to try it a little bit of that and see how that works. And,
well, there was a reward too, $50,000 if you could figure it out.
Oh yeah, they're big rewards, and there's the era after Watergate, and investigative journalism was really romantic and so on, and interesting, and had a lot of intrigue. And but I thought, whatever is behind this is pretty amazing. I started clipping things out of the newspaper, and then I started running down the people, the ranchers, and the law enforcement, and going to interview them. And I got sucked into it totally. Oh, there it is. This is where I say, I am going to solve it. I am going to solve it. I still believe that. You got to believe.
You better hurry up.
You better hurry up. Look at me. Do I look like I'm going to solve anything, really? Except where my toothbrush is. And but no, okay. So all these years later, I think it's perseverance furthers type of thing. So it's many, many years, many dead cows.
Well, you were the chief suspect in a case that happened right at the property line of Libre.
Well, see, I mean, that kind of gets your attention.
Yeah.
But yeah, that Chris and I laugh about our early days, and you were talking a little about the theatrical aspects, and it's like these things are made to be seen. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
if you think about it, whatever is behind this is just as easily have done it when nobody would ever have known the difference.
Yeah.
But it was had a theatrical aspect to it. So in that particular case, I was coming back from a town trip, and I saw a dead cow by the side of the road about a mile from my house, and I stopped and looked at it. It's like, wow, this is one of those mutilation things. And I started looking around really carefully, like a detective, and I walked a few feet away, and I saw 3 drops of blood leading in the direction of my house. And I went, that's the only evidence that I could find at that scene. And so I went back and home, and I went, oh my goodness, this is getting a little close to home. What's going on here? This is whatever it is. It's in this neighborhood. So then I went and talked to the newspaper editor about the story that they'd written about it. And he said, oh, I think you should know, Dave, that you're considered a suspect in this case. And I went, what? I said, well, ever since you guys moved in up there, all the hippie type artists, we've never been quite too sure about you guys. So you were the number one suspect. Why are you so interested in it? The sheriff was asking. Well, because I'm a writer. I'm a journalist. Oh yeah, really? Okay. So if you express,
was he antagonistic toward you, or was it more kind of a ribbing?
Well,
pardon the pun.
At first he was, being a sheriff and an investigator. But we sat down, had a cup of coffee, and really got along well. And he ended up being a really good friend. And he would call me when the mutilations were happening in the county, and I'd jump in the car and go meet him wherever it was. And he would, give me his photos and his police reports. And he was a wonderful guy, a good friend. So it turned out fine. And we had another sheriff in that area, Lou Giroto, who was really amazing. And he was way into the extraterrestrial explanation, and that's kind of interesting coming from a Colorado sheriff. What you can have a mental image of what that might be. A rural sheriff, and these guys have seen a lot, and they are tough. And here, first time I saw him, I said, well, it's got to be extraterrestrials. What else could it be? And it's like, good question. I don't know.
I think that's kind of the first go-to for most people. Wouldn't you agree, Chris?
Well, now, yeah. But not back in 75.
Yeah.
There were too many helicopter reports. And you have a rather conservative, reactionary rancher community on the Front Range, all the way down from Alberta down to to West Texas and New Mexico. A lot of them are heavily armed and in a place of fear a little bit of their government. Remember the times that we were talking about, the mid-70s after Watergate and Vietnam. And, my generation was just having a really good time. But the ranchers on the Front Range in those 3 or 4 years, they really went through it. And by seeing the helicopters, I mean, you automatically are going to jump towards, the government is somehow implicated in this. And if they're not doing it, they're trying to find out who is. I mean, at the very least. So, I don't think it really, the ET thing didn't really come into the scenario until it was heavily promoted, and that Dave was part of the unleashing of the beast.
Yeah. Well, it's sprinkled in those police reports that I was gathering up. Every once in a while, one comes to mind from West Texas, out in the middle of nowhere, and the sheriff's report said, well, the cow was mutilated, and this, that, and the other sounded like a classic mutilation. And about this, nearly the same time was a report of a saucer-shaped craft that came down and looked like it was going to land on the highway, and it was giving off a blue glow, and then it took off really fast. And it's like, what was that? This is in a police report. It wasn't a helicopter, definitely, they were describing. So that kind of stuff is what got Sheriff Girodo all excited, and that's the kind of reports that he filed, complete with mutilated cows and aerial phenomena that don't match any known craft that we know about. So it was a mixed bag, but Colorado is heavily militarized, like Chris is pointing out. So we see where our community is. It's a military operations area, MOA. So we're seeing stuff all the time. And I've seen a lot of things up there that I can't identify. I'm not necessarily saying that they were extraterrestrial, but they sure were weird. They didn't make any sound, and they went round and round and made a big circle around us. We're flying really fast, really low, and totally silent. And somebody called me and said, "Go look out right now." And I looked out and I was like, "What is that?" And then it just took off to the north as fast, just really fast. So, I mean, I saw a lot of things like that. And I, of course, would say it's got to be some sort of experimental craft or something that I don't know about, but what? It doesn't make any noise. And it was obviously close. It looked really close and it was totally silent.
Yeah.
It didn't have any form. It was just very bright light. So, I mean, that was in the 70s, and that was, drone technology wasn't a thing really at that time. Who knows what they were playing with out there? They were playing with all kinds of stuff. But whatever that was, obviously could maneuver at night at very high speed and take off, and nobody would be able to catch it. We see the jets. We see how fast they move, and they're near, and we can tell what's going on with them. And the helicopters, too. See a lot of those. But these other things in the middle of the night, you don't quite know where to put that,
One thing I wanted to ask both of you, what things have you investigated other than cattle mutilations, and what are some of the best cases?
Well, let me do a little bit here. This would kind of end my bio part of it, where I kind of got into being a full-time mutilation investigator, which really came from a trip to Ellsbury, Missouri in 1978. And I picked up on, I think it was an article in the Inquirer, actually. It said, "Flying saucers invaded our town," or something like one of their headlines. And it had the chief living good who was giving a bunch of quotes, and the lady that ran the newspaper, and they said, "We don't know what it is, but cows are getting mutilated, and we're seeing these flying saucers all over the place." And so I went, "Well, we got to go." So my wife, Carrie, and I and a friend said, "We're going to go out there and check this out." So we made the trip. And by the way, I could just parenthetically add that, Chris and I haven't really been financed to do this kind of work in any substantial way. That this is labor of love. It's out of pocket. And that kind of hinders us because we can't just go someplace and say we order a test on this cow, complete necropsy and pay for it and whatnot.
Right.
But we can get there and we can check it out and we can do the best we can with the circumstances. But it was we had to be very resourceful to get to what we did. So we went there, and that's when I first started figuring that whatever this was, there were many more aspects to it than I had thought, because the people that we interviewed there, for instance, were saying that they had seen large, hairy creatures.
Momo.
That was Momo, right. That was Momo. Around the same time that the cows were being mutilated. And I went, well, that's quite a coincidence. And then somebody else would say, well, we were taking a walk in the woods about twilight, and we came upon this group of what they call children. They looked like little kids, about 3 feet tall, dressed in silver suits in the woods. And we went, oh, okay. What were they doing?
Yeah.
And the people took off.
Little humanoid encounter there.
They spooked him out, and then other reports
Well,
had.
I like the last Momo report. He kind of disappeared after this, but the
Yeah.
last one was him running towards a tree line with a sheep under his arm. Remember that?
Yeah, I love that one.
Oh yeah. Well, so okay, we got the cryptids start working in here. We got
Yeah.
so you can't. It's hard to start to separate these phenomena once you're in a flat zone, we call it. And so, okay, I went there. I just wanted to see the mutilated cows. Okay, you say you're seeing flying saucers. Okay, and they did have some photos which are totally indistinct to be able to decipher anything. It just looked like a giant orange ball in the sky, whatever it
Right.
was. So then okay, there was at one point the Bigfoot was going through the dump, and the people got scared and ran off. And then the one that got me were the fishermen on the Mississippi River, and they were out there at twilight fishing, and they looked up the river, and they saw something come floating down the river, and said, the closer it got, they said, it looks like 355-gallon drums kind of in formation. And just when it got close to them, it just rose up out of the water and took off and flew at amazing speed and disappeared. So it's like, oh, wow, okay. Yeah, where do you put that? I mean, that's not exactly a cryptid, but it's not an everyday occurrence that you see 55-gallon drums rise up and fly off the water. So, the more you poke around, you just talk to people and you gain their confidence, and they'll start telling you these stories.
Was there video of that? I remember seeing a video of
not that
a
I know.
UFO that looked like a cylinder. I think my brother pointed it out to me.
I'm almost certain it wouldn't have been that case, but it's just so I left Ellsbury thinking, well, and then the final straw that broke the camel's back, the muse's back was there was one area where there was a microwave tower, and it seemed like the activity was generally centered around this microwave tower up on a high spot. So our little crew said, okay, we're going to go out there and camp out our last night in Ellsbury. And we're going to stay up. One or the other of us will stay up. We'll take shifts for an hour or two, and you sleep, and always one person will be awake and just watching that field, because that's where the mutilations had happened, several of them, and the sightings. So we did that, and we took our little spells, and we didn't see a darn thing, of course. It's like, okay, well, we're out of here. And so down the road in the middle of the day, I called back to Sheriff Livingood because I had a question for him. And he said, what happened? You guys left? I said, yeah. And they said, did you see it? See what? The mutilation in the field that night. It's like, what? No way.
While you were watching.
Yeah.
And didn't see a thing.
I didn't see a thing. So I went, oh my. Where do you start putting that kind of information? It's like either it just got by us, or they didn't have their lights on, or that it was, I don't know, there was no good explanation for it. But at the timing of it just seemed weird. Of course, it could have just been a coincidence. But the fact that we staked that field out with the intent of seeing whatever was happening, seeing it for ourselves, and hopefully photographing it or getting some kind of close contact with it. And it wasn't happening, and the daylight came, and there was nothing there, and we left. Now, one other thing about that particular area, there was a giant Monsanto plant there that was just spewing noxious chemicals all over the place. And at the time, I was starting to generate my theory that the cattle were being mutilated as test animals for environmental contaminants, with nuclear radiation being primary, but other sites too that I've kind of mapped out, that severe ecological hazard zones, Superfund sites and stuff like that, where you might want to monitor the animal life in that vicinity if you wanted to read out about what was really going on in the environment, and you wanted to do it secretly. So anyway, we said goodbye to Ellsbury, and after that, I thought, well, this is much, much more complicated than I thought. I think there were a few helicopters thrown in that mix too, as I recall now, in Ellsbury. But it pretty much had the basics. You had your cryptids, you had your humanoid types, you had it's just flying drums and saucers and mutilated cows. I don't know. It was a huge story in the area, and made
Oh
nationwide
yeah,
news.
you even got a T-shirt.
Oh yeah, it was. Well, we went out every night. The people would go out and park on this one area by that microwave tower on the road and have a party basically, and wait for the saucers to show up. And so, of course, we'd go out there and hang out with them, and it's like, yeah, this is really fun. And people would drink beer and barbecuing. It was really like a great party. And they were saying, "Come on down, you're welcome here. You're welcome here." It's like, are you sure they just killed all these cows? Is that really what you really wanted? So anyway, they had a T-shirt made up that said, "Welcome to Ellsbury, Missouri, mutilated cow country," and it was a picture of an alien hanging out of a flying saucer with a bloody leg of a cow, right? And I thought, wow, that's really putting you guys on the map, all right. Yeah.
I live in northeastern Kansas, so that's already scary for me.
What? Which part of it?
Lawrence, where the University
no,
of
I mean,
Kansas is.
which part of it is scary?
Oh, that it's in the neighboring state.
Oh yeah, well that's close. That's indeed close. But anyway, this is where I started thinking. Well, we're not only have we got a crazy confluence of whatever mysterious items that we can't identify, but now we've got a cultural phenomenon of sorts.
Yeah.
So once it hits the T-shirts, then you're on your way and to full blown meme creation. And I don't know if Chris has used that term yet, but
No.
we use it a lot as a word of currency, basically. And a meme is, we know what a meme is on the internet, of course, but the original definition of it is basically just any unit of cultural evolution, basically, that can be transferred from mind to mind. So some books about it call it like virus of the mind, but it's something that gets transmitted and retold and reshaped and added onto, and it's an item of culture, and it has various purposes in any given culture, either to create unity or sense of identity or a number of things, a lot of things. So anyway, once it hits the meme status, then you're off into another realm of how is this affecting the culture? How is this getting into people's minds? Where are they putting this? Where are they filing this kind of information? Or how are they changing their behavior because of it? So we talk about memes a lot, and Chris does in the book, and in our conversations we do too, because I think that's a really important part of it.
Yeah.
How it's sculpting the culture. For what? I have ideas, but I won't go into it quite yet.
Well, the evolutionary imperative, I just think it makes so much sense, and the entertaining the possibility that perhaps the planet has more to do with what happens on it than we give it credit for. There could be some pretty interesting attributes that the planet may have that we're not scientifically aware of it. And
well, I do want to get into that just a little bit later, Chris.
Yeah.
In full detail, but right now I was just thinking, we're just trying to lay out the baseline of what we deal with.
Yeah.
And I was sort of thinking we might. Hey, Cardinal Sin, you just dropped out on me in live. I don't know. It sure was nice seeing you there for a while. Oh, there you are. But I was
just covering up the fact that my roommate popped in.
Oh, well.
And I didn't want the noise to drown out what you were saying.
Oh, okay. Well, what I was thinking that we would maybe take a look at the three major theories and sort of branch out from there.
Well,
which has been boiled down to in the media frequently as saucers, Satanists, or CIA. That, a clever kind of media head grabber, attention getter. So saucers, Satanist, or CIA. That would be how it was framed, and it still is to this day. If you read the reports that come, most recent mute wave, I guess you call it, has been in Oregon over the last few years, till fairly recently. I don't know what's going on there in the last few months, but it's been recent. But anyway, the local press covered it as they gave a lot of credence to the cult theory, for instance. And they had all these people weighing in about it. What's really interesting is on those kind of sites, like a small town where you go to if they have a website where the readers weigh in on what they think's going on. It's just, I learned so much from those sites.
Yeah.
And these people are saying, well, everybody knows that the Satanists are harvesting some brain chemical from the cow that they trip out on and get high, and there's ceremonies and so on and so on, or they shoot them up with this, and then they drink the blood, and on and on and on. And it's like, yeah, everybody knows that, right? Okay. But there's still, that theory is still very prominent in some of those communities.
It's all, we tracked it down in Stalking the Herd, where that connection actually was first made. And come to find out, it inadvertently was started by the UFO community to try to get
to
get the onus off of the aliens as perpetrators. Alan Hynek and Jerry Clark and others.
Yeah.
Upper
now you're
echelons, talking. The upper echelons of ufology. They heard about Dugan and Bankston, these two inmates in Texas, who claimed that they were, if you got us out of this maximum security prison and to a medium or minimum, we could tell you about the mutilations because we were involved. And they claimed that they were part of an occult group that was going out and mutilating cows. And the cops, the FBI and others, they fell for it. And so they started doing extensive interviews, and then Dugan and Bankston messed up. Their story started to fall apart, and things that were supposed to happen didn't. And but during the time when they were being considered real informants, Alan Hynek and Jerry Clark warned the ATF agent Donald Flickinger, the regional BATF guy, that he should be on the lookout for occult groups who may be responsible for mutilating cattle. So he went ahead and sent out a memo to every sheriff in the country stating that we have a suspicion that these cases could be done by devil worshippers or Satanists, and that's I think you'd have to correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think that could really be the place where it started. Anton LaVey, the head of the Church of Satan, he had to become an expert on cattle mutilations so that he could explain how he wasn't involved like everybody thought he was.
Yeah, the whole satanic panic thing in the 80s just got out of control.
So that segued into the mutilations.
Yeah, ritual abuse.
But it's very instructive, that whole situation that Chris is describing, because here we have J. Allen Hynek himself, Mr. UFO, and Jerry Clark, a very, very prominent ufologist.
Well, Mr. Blue Book, anyway.
Well, yeah, okay. But to many, he's the face of ufology, or was for a long time. But
I'm being overly pedantic because Timothy Green Beckley is Mr. UFO.
Oh, golly, that's right. Doggone it. I get those two.
Well, he's also Mr. Well, he just passed away a couple of weeks ago, so I have to not speak ill of the dead. But he He called himself Mr. Creepo.
Yeah.
That's right, he did. And I've always assumed that the books that were written by Commander X were written by Timothy Green Beckley.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's finish this off though about the satanic part here with the mutes, because that was really a big deal, and it still is. So, in terms of the major theories and where people place this in their worldview, and it's we've had a few cases where altars were found. Oh my God! Don't wave that at me. Be nice. Ooh. So there's been just enough so-called evidence associated with mutilations that it gives some credence to that theory, and it's in Montana, for instance, there were altar sites found in the vicinity of mutilations with Isis favor us or something like that, and stone circles. That's a motif that shows up quite a bit. Showed up in up near Cuesta, New Mexico, Arkansas.
On the Sam Walton's ranch.
And the Sam Walton Ranch was my favorite, or his farm in Arkansas. And that was picked up on pretty heavy, the cult angle in Arkansas. People were saying, well, everybody knows that when those outsiders started moving into Arkansas, that's when this all started, when the people from back east or way down south or whatever started moving up into Arkansas. That's when the troubles started. In other words, it's a typical thing of blame the newcomers type of scenario, and the weird people that aren't like us. But on the Walton farm, and there was some sort of weird thing that we never could decode that was part of one of that cult site, as a matter of fact. Remember that, Chris?
Yeah, weird writing, yeah.
We couldn't decode what the heck it was, and nobody could either. There's some sort of Gallic druid symbols. I don't know what it was.
Yeah.
But so that, and Colorado's had its share, a few of those, but the ones that come to mind are Montana and Arkansas, of course. But that hangs around. But back to Hynek, and it's really important for ufology how understanding ufology, how it's dealt with the mutilations. And I think we're going to run into a situation here fairly soon where the mutilations are going to come back to the fore in this discussion about UFOs. Back then, Hynek, they were all into scientific ufology, right? This was the cry. And we're going to do things by science, and it's all science. And they didn't like the mutilations at all because they thought it muddied the waters of pure ufology.
And back then, they didn't like repeaters.
Yeah, right.
For the same reason.
Yeah, they didn't. And here was something being repeated over and over. And they couldn't figure out what it was. But back to Flickinger, the ATF agent, he was a friend of Hynek's before any of this happened. And Hynek would actually send him out to places in Minnesota to check out so-called mutilations and UFO reports. Remember that guy, Terrence Mitchell? He went out there and interviewed him. That he reported the mutilations and saucer landing pads and whatnot.
Right.
But Flickinger was a friend of Hynek's from before all of this. And so he thought, well, we'll get Flickinger out there, and he's got the credentials, and he'll come back and tell us, it's most likely cults. And then somebody smeared blood on Flickinger's door, and there was some.
Was it Passover?
No, I don't think so. I think it was Hynek that did it. I don't know. No, I'm just kidding. He wouldn't do that. But anyway, I thought it was disingenuous at best for Clark and Hynek, and Kevin Randall got in on it to start trying to palm the mutes off on the satanic cults and leave ufology pure and not get things muddied up in people's minds. So if they could just dump it off on the Satanist, that was their preference. I think they kind of went out of their way to do that, and then it all fell apart. Eventually, there was no evidence. The Dugan Bankson thing didn't pan out. the cops all over the country started looking for cults mutilating cows. They found nothing really. They came up with nothing, and so that kind
and that correlates with the entire satanic panic thing.
Yeah.
None of any of that, worked out.
Yeah, it didn't work out, but it's still hanging around. It's still part of the scenario.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lady gave a lecture.
It's again, this is more of a cultural thing. I think the more conservative you are, most rural people, ranchers and farmers are conservative, and they're heavily Christian, and something like this, it's the work of the devil.
Right.
It's negative
Yeah.
demons. It's the devil, and so I think that's why in these small rural papers and stuff that the occult thing comes up, because it's like you said, David, the fear of an outsider coming in and doing something that you have no recourse to counteract, and so that it's the impotence and the powerlessness creates I think the fear of the occult.
But that's a slightly different category. I think we both had cases that were similar. Mine was very local and near where I lived. I got word that the rancher, Hispanic couple, owned some cows, and I got word that they'd had mutilation. So I got a hold of them and said, I'd really like to come and see it. And they went, okay. So I showed up. I said, I don't think I can get there with much light, but I'd like to at least see it with a flashlight. I got there at twilight. And I pulled into the driveway, and the wife came running out saying, stop. And I went, I thought we were going to get together. No. And she pointed over to the field where the husband was on a backhoe, digging furiously as fast as he could to bury the damn cow, right?
Yeah.
She said he thinks it's the work of the devil, and he doesn't, he's got to bury it as soon as possible. And I went, okay. If you didn't want to talk about it, I can't make him, but I'd sure like to see it. But it was buried at that point. And I think you had a similar case, didn't you?
A couple of them.
Yeah.
The one was a 2.5-hour ride from my house.
Yeah.
Too. So you're talking 5 hours round trip. And I got out there and I could see where it had been laying, and I saw the tracks of his front loader, and it was gone. And when I went in, the wife says, "Oh, it was right next to the house here in the pen. Is where it was found mutilated." And she said, "It's right out there." And I went out there, and she didn't even know that he had taken it. And of course, he ducked the meeting with me.
Right. Yeah.
So
we got that. That's the primal instinct thing. That what we're talking about, sort of what about Hynek was more of an institutional way of dealing with it, and how it affected ufology, which was really bizarre when you think about it, because the ufologists went out of their way to kick the mutilation investigators and say, "You guys are idiots. This is a collective delusion of some sort," and so on and so on, which is a theory that we have to cover eventually. But so anyway, they wanted it off their hands, and they got it off their hands.
Some of it is. I agree with that.
Yeah,
I think some of it is.
We'll open that one in a minute. But how about okay? So then APRO jumped on the bandwagon,
right,
and said, "Oh yes, this is a cult that's establishing 1,000-year reign of Satan in the United States," and whatever. I think that was being pumped through Kevin Randall and his articles in Saga and whatnot, this cult run by somebody named Harold or something. All this stuff that turned out to be just nonsense. But they were really, APRO and UFOs, or whatever it was called at the time, I guess it was, they were real eager to get the mutes off their hands, out of ufology. Which was kind of odd, because when Snoopy got mutilated in 1967, they sent an investigator. APRO was way into it, and they sent deputy sheriff, this guy Don Richmond, to go check it out. And he he was a UFO guy, and he said, "Boy, this certainly looks like it's the work of UFOs to me," and filed the report accordingly. So something happened in the years between 67 and mid 70s, whatever it was, late 70s, that changed APRO's mind about the mutilations. Then they no longer wanted any part of it. And then just one other item in terms of ufology, Snippy the horse itself, the case, you could make a case that particular Snippy case was what crashed the Condon Committee, because they sent some investigators down who took it seriously.
Case number 32 in the Condon report.
And so they went back to Boulder and said, boy, that sure looks like some kind of UFO thing going on there. And Condon, of course, was having no part of that. So it created a huge rift in the committee. And then everything just started disintegrating from there. So Snippy destroyed the Condon Committee, I think. Was highly instrumental. They couldn't figure out how to deal with it.
Yeah.
And Condon just said, okay, we're just brushing all of this aside. And
I love the quote that Burl Lewis, the owner, the husband of the owner of the horse, Nellie Lewis, he said, yeah, the scientists came down, and after we showed him, and he talked to some people, he just sat there at the motel there in the sands drinking.
Sounds like us.
He didn't go anywhere. He just started drinking and didn't stop.
Right. Yeah, that's a natural response to it sometimes, I swear.
Yep.
So we've got it now coming back around again. Then a few years after that, I went to a MUFON conference, and they were up there saying, yeah, the mutilations are definitely part of ufology. Yeah, that's a big part because it proves the existence of UFOs and aliens. It's like, oh, now they're adopting it to back up their point of view.
Well, we have a particular person to applaud for that.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Okay. Would you like to explain that?
No, because you met her first.
Well, okay, David. Let's get the inside
how did Linda? She's the chief proponent, really, of the alien phenomenon. Chuck Zukowski.
She's the chief proponent of everything.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Dan Turish, J-Rod,
80 years old. She's done a lot.
Yeah.
She's been a real trooper.
Yeah, she has. She took her position early, and she had her position established before I ever met her. What I found out after I'd met her basically was that her family and Kenneth Arnold's family were friends in Idaho, which is kind of an odd connection. Kenneth Arnold, of course, the original saucer sighting. So I thought, well, interesting. So I think she was raised in that kind of lore of this flying saucer, Linda was. And then she was Miss Idaho and so on. But anyway, when she got around to the cattle mutilations, it was in the late 70s.
Wait a minute, you may have buried the lead. Did you say she was Miss Idaho?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I never knew that.
Oh, yeah.
Linda, for her age, she's still a very attractive woman. But when she was younger, she turned heads. She was a reporter, a television reporter in Denver.
Yeah, and she was a beauty queen.
And very good one.
She did some really great environmental investigative work and journalism before she got full on into the mutes. But I'm not quite sure what set her off. Maybe I'm sure she'd been watching the news coverage in Colorado about the mutilations, because that was pretty steady all the way through the 70s.
Yeah.
And then she got a bug about it, so I'm going to investigate that. And then I think the first person she called was our friend Tom Adams. And he said, well, you should talk to David Perkins because he's there in your neighborhood. And I gave her a call. And she said, get up here as fast as you can. And this was in early 80, spring of 80. Because Senator Schmidt's conference had happened in April of 79. So I went up there soon thereafter. I think it was early spring of 80. And I loaded up my car and drove all the way up to Denver with all the books and files and papers. And she saw my car and said, "We got to start copying this." And it's like, okay. So I left it with her overnight, and she just copied every single thing. And then we hung out a bit, and then we had another trip where I introduced her to my sources, the police and the ranchers up in the Denver area and Colorado Springs area. We made a run and did some interviews with those people. And then we had a fairly fresh one that happened down near where I lived in southern Colorado, and she came down for that, did a real extensive piece on that, which ended up in Strange Harvest. A lot of the footage from our trips ended up in her video, Strange Harvest. Anyway, she was off to the races, but she was absolutely convinced from the beginning that it was UFOs with aliens in them. And they were doing it for their purposes. We don't know what, and she really has never varied with that. Over the years, I've talked to her about all these other ideas, and she was like, "Nope, nope, nope." And I said, "Okay." She said, "What's talking to me?" She said, "Why don't you just take a stand?" And I said, "This is something you take a stand about, Well, sometimes you just have to take a stand. It's like, well, no, you don't actually, unless you know the answer, which I don't quite clearly. But she's sticking with it, and she may be right in the end. Who knows? But that's not the way. It's funny how two people can see it so diametrically opposed.
Yeah.
And I think Chris has said in the past something like, to him, the alien explanation is probably about the bottom of the list of suspects, really, or near the bottom. Did you say that, Chris?
It would be the least likely explanation in my mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's not what she wanted to hear. So.
Well, yeah, but that, it's it's like what did George W. Bush say? You're either with us or against us.
Yeah. Well.
It's very, very dichotomous and cut and dry.
But it's coincidental for me that he ended up saying, "Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, can't get fooled again." Because when his dad was running for president the first time, I was managing a used record store, and on election day, I played "Won't Get Fooled Again" all day, over and over and over.
Oh, God, really? Oh, God.
To the outside speakers.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Well, we get fooled every day, actually, in this business. But so anyway, Linda's still doing her thing. We're doing our thing, and to finish out the rest of that thought, it seems to me that Chris and I collect these memes of basically the meme is a flying saucer with a cow being sucked up in a beam of light into the saucer, and it's everywhere. It's just there it is. Well, there's something being sucked up.
Similar anyway.
But the cow in particular, I've got all these things Chris has found for me over the years. These lamps and some really beautiful handmade stuff with this same motif. And it's the darndest thing. I'm still struck by, I think it was 2 years ago at Christmas in Albuquerque, they have the Parade of Lights, and they put up all these light sculptures, And I was watching TV, and they said, "Oh, let's come on down to the Parade of Lights," and some really beautiful sculptures of lights and stuff. And here's our main attraction, the one that everybody just loves. It's just so much fun for the family. And what it was a flying saucer with a cow being sucked up into it. And I was thinking, like, this is family fun. I mean,
what's that T-shirt? Get in and let's do butt stuff.
Right. Yeah. So as the kids are going, isn't that great? And by the way, I just noticed that the sign for Roswell, the welcome sign to the city of Roswell, is now, it's a sculpture. It's a metal flying saucer, and with a cow being sucked up into it. Right?
I don't doubt it.
Yeah,
I gotta find a picture of that.
I've got some photos of it. Yeah, because I thought,
Wow. I
but
didn't know that.
the implication there a couple of implications. One, anybody who knows anything about the subject knows that that's cows most likely to die from the experience, uh, according
Yeah,
to
it's no fun for a cow, for
according
sure.
to the folklore. But a lot of people maybe somebody wrote a children's book that says, "Oh, they suck them up and the cows they fly them back to their planet where the cows actually saved the lives of the people on that planet." And I thought, boy, that's really stretching it. That was a
That's an
book that
interesting idea.
that book came with one of the lights that I ordered from somebody of a cow being, in a beam of light being sucked up, and say, no, it's not going to get hurt in the process. It's like, oh, yes, it is. But
We do have a question from the chat. Herc130 asks, is there a trusted government or private organization that does forensic autopsies on these animals to discredit fakers and collect data?
You mean a consistent official? It's number one. It's a state by state thing. It doesn't violate any federal laws for the most part. And if you have, for instance, mutilations on Native American reservations or Indian reservations, and that would fall under the FBI's jurisdiction, and you would have some federal involvement there. But the problem is that you're because the animal is left back on the property generally. There's really no apparent crime that's being committed, and the rancher would be the one to have to bear the brunt of any costs of having a vet or
But
even a more expensive.
all their cattle are insured, right?
No.
Very, very rarely.
Very rarely.
If they lose a cow
ranchers.
to this kind of experience, it's not insured.
I know a guy that his cow was sick, so he went ahead and killed it and mutilated it, and then called up the insurance company. He was more of a wealthy guy that could afford the insurance, and they came and looked at it and went, "Are you kidding? You did this?" And he went, "Okay, yeah, I did it." It was just so silly. But in general, these are poor ranchers.
Yeah.
They don't have insurance.
Now, if they'd taken the cow and done God knows what to it, that would be larceny. That'd be a crime. Stolen livestock, stolen head of livestock. And
I always thought that they were put back on the property so that the rancher wouldn't lose the money that the cow was worth.
No,
I don't think so. No. They're not getting any money out of it, really, anything to speak of.
No, and as a matter of fact, the question is, how come there's not people that are doing autopsies? Who's going to pay for it? If it's not a crime and it's not under the jurisdiction of law enforcement, then, it falls under the agriculture department, correct. But they have what, like 2, 3...
Or the Bureau of Land Management, probably.
Yeah, but
they're not going to pay for it.
No.
No.
You're not going to get anybody to pay for it. You're not even going to get them to come out and take a look.
Right. The only way I've been successful in basically getting that kind of information is to have a personal relationship with a vet.
Right.
And he says, yeah, well, I'll go out, I don't believe you, but if one happens, let me know, and I'll go look at it. Well, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
So the vet, he was really skeptical, and I called him and said, there's one over there on Pass Creek Road. It just happened. You better get over there. I haven't seen it myself. Go now. And he went over and came back to my house and went, oh, my God. And I went, what? And he said, that cow was mutilated by a sharp instrument, and he'd done a necropsy on it, and it's a female cow that was pregnant. He'd opened the sac to the fetus, and the little baby cow was mutilated within an intact sac in its mother. It's like, I went,
wow.
What? He said, how could this be? And I said, are you sure? I mean, Yeah, well, yeah, I'm really sure. So, I mean, that he was just shaking. He didn't know what the hell to make of it. I mean, he was. I don't think he ever went and looked at another one. Actually, I think it freaked him out so bad.
So bad, yeah.
He just
Well,
could. So we
yeah.
get the vets to do it, and then we had Bigelow for a while pumping
Yeah,
for the.
Bigelow was paying for it, and John Rayo,
Yeah,
uh, who was the guy that bought Wendell Stevens' collection and stuff, and ran the UFO Congress for a number of years. And they published a magazine, Open Minds magazine. He offered to pay all lab costs if I had any cases that happened during the time of year where the case was remained fresh long enough, or that somebody could be on site within 24 hours. Because after that, the window of opportunity forensically is fairly short. It's really difficult. Yeah. It's not like a human where you can throw them in a ambulance and take them to a lab or something. A cow, you know, sometimes when they try to load the cow up, it's only been dead for 8 hours and the thing falls apart. It's already rotted. Other times, the animals won't rot.
It'll lie there for a year.
Necrosis. Yeah, exactly. Like a McDonald's hamburger.
It's just petrified in stone. It seems like it's just. I've seen them lying in fields just totally intact for a year.
Yeah.
Some of the mutes. It's like, well, how could that even be?
I know. Well, it's a semi-arid environment.
But back to Bigelow. He pumped, I would say, millions of dollars over 7 years to have the best pathology people you could buy, and they're all top of the line PhD type people looking at these things, and so, for 7 years.
And they released a number of very interesting reports that were very well done. That were peer reviewable. They did, acknowledge that they were singularly focused. They did not attempt to bring in other coincidental or circumstantial events, like the Montana report that they did. They did a whole report on the Montana wave in the 70s. They didn't mention the Bigfoot that was running around, or
I got on their case a little bit about that, and I think I made them mad because they put out that terrific report, really well done, and then they just casually say, "Oh, and by the way, there were 67 other anomalies." Period. And it's like, and if you'd read "Mystery Stalks the Prairie" by Keith Wolverton, you would know what those anomalies were, and a lot of them were Bigfoot.
Yeah,
that was happening in the same vicinity as the mutilations, the weird helicopters, the saucers type crap, the cult sites. They didn't know. We don't know. That's over here. It's the same way of same trap that Hynek fell into. They try to separate these phenomena. I maintain that they're all linked.
All connected.
They have.
I mean, the Bigfoot researchers say, "Get your UFOs out of my Bigfoot." Yeah, and the UFO researchers say, "Get your Bigfoot out of my UFOs."
Yeah, what's up?
And
there's some cases with both that are just blow your mind. Really good, well documented cases, especially the one in Pennsylvania, the one that Stan Gordon investigated, the wintertime one. That's one of the coolest cases I've ever heard of.
Did Stan Gordon write a book about the two phenomena together?
I think he did, actually.
Yeah.
Really?
It just came out. I don't know if it was Stan. I did see it might have been. He's written extensively about it.
I wanted to correct a previous mistake on my part, which is that I have not promoted the Christopher O'Brien website, ourstrangeplanet.com.
It's been locked down.
And I wanted to ask if these books were still available.
Yeah, they are. Although Stalking the Tricksters is out of print. I only have
ebooks?
I've managed to hold on to about 13 of them.
Oh, cool.
But I've got ebooks for everything.
And then you also have music CDs.
Yeah, kind of.
Because you're also a musician.
Yeah.
And you also have DVDs.
Yeah, I do. Actually, of my lectures.
And are these all available from your website?
Yep. They are.
Very cool. And
the disclosure dialogues, they probably have to wait a little bit on that.
$15 a piece, folks. So,
yeah, I'm not really in this to like David said before that if I if I tried to make this my career, it would you wouldn't really consider me very successful.
I'll point out the disclosure dialogues for DVD set, plus the 5th disc, the multiple EBE award-winning documentary, It Could Happen Tomorrow.
Right.
That whole kit and caboodle is just $30.
Yeah.
So get thee to ourstrangeplanet.com. And Chris, while we're here, is there anything else that we should check out?
UFODAP, the UFO Data Acquisition Project. It's we're now in 5 countries, and we have a dozen versions of the software operating. The motion tracking software is operating on several systems, including at Skinwalker Ranch. If you bring up ufodap.com, you'll be able to see what we're doing.
Okay.
We're customizing multi-sensor packages for folks in up to 6 cameras or 6 incoming feeds into the computer. So ideally, you'd have 3 cameras triangulated, and when an event happens, we have a software program that identifies everything that it can identify, and if there's something that's moving that they can't identify, then it goes into record mode, and we triangulate, and all 3 cameras focus in on the object, with the first camera that detected the object goes in close immediately for close-up, and then the other 2 are at a more medium focal point. So, I mean, if I'd done this 20 years ago, it would have cost over $1 million to set this.
Is this the right one?
That's it. What you're looking at is a high def camera that's in an enclosure that will protect it from 120 degrees Fahrenheit down to about 50 below 0 Fahrenheit. And this one is set up in the San Luis Valley. We have 2 in Utah. One that's going in next door to the Skinwalker Ranch. The ranch is already using the software. This is the actual software. It's based out of GPS and Google Maps and stuff. And here's the inside this enclosure is a recording magnetometer, recording gravitometer, a super fast full frequency radio spectrum analyzer. We have apertures for dedicated cameras with polarized filters and blaze gratings to separate light into its constituent elements. We're working on a system of active radar. We have the same environmental package that you have on the space station is in there.
And if you have 3 or more of these, you can use them to triangulate in real time, right?
You just need 3 cameras. You only need one of those units.
Oh.
With the sensors in it. That square one, you only need one of those. I mean, you can have if you want to spend the money and have more of them.
But when one camera picks something up that's anomalous, the other 2 will rotate that direction, right?
Exactly. Yeah, it's all done over the internet. It's all turnkey. You don't really have to do much except turn it on. Also, we have merged with a group called UFO Data, who are going to do the same thing that we're doing. But since we beat them to the punch, they said they would. We have an arrangement with them that we supply them the data, and then they analyze it for us. And we're talking some pretty talented academics, several from Ohio State, I think a couple from Northwestern, old CUFOS guys, probably some of them. Anyway, we have these systems now in South America and Australia, and Canada, Italy, Switzerland, and sky's the limit. What's really neat is systems started around $300 for a real super inexpensive starter system, and then a full blown one is about $5,000 with 3 cameras, with the with the magnetometer and gravitometer and all the sensors. You can have a top of the line system for about $5,000.
And
I just thought I'd mention that.
Has the technology or your work with Ray Stanford improved the UFO DAP?
Yeah, well, Ray was the one that insisted that we come up with a way to analyze the light more effectively at night, and that's with a blaze grating, which is a way to separate the wavelengths of light into their packages, shall we say, so that you can for an optical physicist, he can then analyze the energy source that's producing the light. And it's people call me a ufologist, and I tell people, please don't call me that. I don't want to be lumped in with them guys. But
it's better than a UFO expert, right?
Well, if I was one of those guys, then I would be doing something like UFODAP, because we need hard data, and the only way to get hard data is have sensors to record it. So, anyway, enough of the commercial. Let's get on to back to our conversation.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that this is the book that we're giving away tonight. Thanks to Chris, an autographed copy of Stalking the Herd, and we'll also be giving away an Into the Fringe t-shirt. So make sure and stick around to the end of the show for that. Got to get those plugs in.
Feel like I'm getting a hoarse voice. I'm talking too much.
Well, that's why you're here.
Oh,
oh, that's right.
David, I did want to touch on a couple of areas in which you've done some research. Maybe we can start with thought forms, the Tibetan tulpa, and modern interpretations, such as Thomas Bearden's prophetic tulpoids. How do thought forms appear in esoteric traditions, especially as elucidated by Chris's research?
Was that a question from a listener?
No, it's from me.
Oh, okay. That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a really good question.
It's funny you mention it, because just before the show, I happened to be Googling Alexandra David Neal, who was the lady that wrote the book Magic and Mystery in Tibet, who kind of launched the idea of the tulpa into Western discourse, and what it was for her. And it was a very influential book in the counterculture. It got the attention of people like Allen Ginsberg and Kerouac and Ram Dass and people like that, it's when Eastern philosophy started filtering in to the counterculture was through that book. The one very amazing thing in the book was her description of a tulpa, which was an entity that could be kindled into existence. I guess that's the word. Brought it manifest by ritual. In her case, she wanted to trek through Tibet, and she needed somebody to carry her stuff. And she wanted a little monk who would, carry her backpacks and stuff. So she said, "I'm going to manifest this little monk," and which she did, according to her. And then everything was going out pretty well for quite some time. And then the monk became troublesome and wouldn't obey her and got out of her control and started developing a mind of his own to do whatever he wanted. And finally, she just said, I can't deal with this. So she did a ritual and dissipated it. So it's like, wow.
Successfully?
Yes. So this is what we call an apocryphal story. But nonetheless, I've met the Dalai Lama. I didn't ask him about this. I just didn't have the nerve. But I asked his right-hand man when I got him off to the side, "What's up with the tulpa thing?" He went, "What?" He claimed to have no knowledge of what I was talking about. So it's like, oh, okay. Here you go, white guy. You come and ask me about tulpas? You got to be kidding me.
Well, how about
Don't bother me with this Tibetan tradition stuff.
Right.
Well, if you go to Pagosa Springs, there's a cave there where there's I think it was Nyingma, fiery tradition. He buried his staff halfway into granite. And it's I think that's the one that's there. It's either that or he left his footprints in the stone.
The tulpa thing. Okay, to finish that, Tom Bearden picked up on that. And it's an idea that had occurred to me also. It's like, I was somewhat familiar with the idea of thought forms, and then through David Neal, actually, I guess, from way back. But anyway, Bearden wrote the Excalibur Briefing book, which was quite an amazing book. It's overlooked by many ufologists. And I had the opportunity to meet and talk to Bearden about it because we would go to the same conferences, which was basically the Tesla conferences. He was way into Tesla, and so was I, way back early 80s. And his idea of a prophetic tulpoid was something that bubbles up out of the collective unconscious of humanity, basically. And its purpose is to warn us, or in his case, he saw it as a manifestation of our fear of the Russians, basically, that they had in their heart to kill us all, and these tulpoids were bubbling up, and the symbology was that they're going after the cow, the symbol of sustenance for our civilization, and the milk and the reproductive parts, and somehow it was an omen of sorts that a collective psychic warning to us. So this is what he calls prophetic tulpa. And at one point I asked him, everybody asked me the same question about this manifestation business. It's like, well, what's the agent that does it? Okay, so all that collective unconscious energy coalesces somehow and has this effect on the cow. Well, what's the actual physical part that's doing it to the cow? He said, there is none. It's just instantaneous. All the cells rearrange themselves in that way. The look, everything about it is just, it's an instantaneous as soon as that critical mass is reached in the collective unconscious. And I've tried to explain that to people. I went, no, even myself, because I'm basically mechanistic in my thinking. I come from a materialist tradition, and for the idea of something,
you reductionist.
It's a vaguely communist idea, but but that's a big leap. But then the more I've been into this, it's not as big a leap as I
it's
thought.
not as big. No, in fact, it makes an awful lot of sense. If we do, if one particular potential answer excites me the most, is the idea that somehow Gaia is coming up with ways to clue us in that we're like little baby birds that are overstaying their time in the nest. And I think something in our environment realizes that we're the most detrimental thing to the biodiversity and everything else here. So
yeah,
maybe there is some sort of superorganism that's somehow tied into our collective. We're all part of one consciousness type scenario, and we're being given clues to get ourselves off planet. David came up with
it's like
great
a
theory.
dog with too many fleas trying to shake them off.
Well,
David came up with what he calls the evolutionary imperative, and it just makes so much sense to me. Obviously, we have to do a little bit more work to try to figure out what the actual mechanistic part of this is. How could it be possible? But in theory,
in the
it
Church
makes
of
a
the
lot of
Subgenius,
sense.
we say, we must get off. Build your own ship.
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, there's a couple of us that are doing just that. Well, great.
Speaking of the Church of the Subgenius, this is a question either or both of you could answer. Could you explain the role of the archetypal shape-shifting trickster in paranormal studies with a focus on George Hansen, Chris's work, David, yourself, and others? Is the trickster alive in the modern world?
Oh boy.
The trickster is the modern world.
Well, I'm really familiar with this material, and I've been into it for a long time and familiar with Hansen. I wrote the early reviews of Trickster, his Trickster book for MUFON and for Magonia in England. When I read it, it was just such a breakthrough. I'd always been aware of Trickster type stuff through Dennis Stillings way back in the day. I don't know if anybody's familiar with him, but he was the one that got me into it. Basically, he was talking about helicopters, these so-called mystery helicopters. He said that's the Trickster of our time, And I went, oh, okay, it kind of makes sense. And then the more I work with that material, the more I think that it's true that the Trickster. Where I parted ways with Hansen a bit was that he was saying, okay, the trickster in traditional cultures is there to occasionally turn everything upside down periodically to allow novelty to emerge and to create a more robust society. And so it's a mechanism of sorts that just even for one day of the year, everything, the chief is no longer the chief. Everybody does the opposite jobs they're supposed to. But the trickster that finds various ways to manifest itself in animals or people or situations and cultures each shape their idea of the so-called trickster into what's culturally appropriate for them. But so we end up with our trickster is basically the UFO, I think. But where Hansen and I parted a bit was like I said, well, I would really like a cultural analysis of this, because I think what's happening here is the trickster is more like a biological force field, and that it finds its way into manifesting in these ways that I discussed to fit the culture, to fit the time, and to be effective. So it's a bit of a flawed analogy, but he didn't like that because he thought, well, that's just another attempt at reductionism and scientism, and you're removing enchantment from the world. Now, as if I have the ability to remove enchantment from the world, I'd like to think it was quite the opposite. But that's where I'm working that area right now because I still think that it fits into Gaia theory that if my mantra these days is that the mutilations are the key to understanding the paranormal. The paranormal is the key to understanding consciousness, and consciousness is the key to understanding everything. So right now we're at a
Interesting.
tipping point. We're at a tipping point in ufology. I feel it's swinging slightly toward a more consciousness-based approach, which the Europeans have had for some time, the psychosocial way of it instead of the nuts and bolts of way of looking at it. So I just see hints of it that, even in the highest circles, the Pentagon people, and I hear it every once in a while. We're now looking into consciousness effects, and I think that's why they were so into Bigelow,
Right,
into
and
Skinwalker.
yeah, and the interplay between what one would think would be divergent phenomena and the close proximity interplay that has been actually very well documented. And I'm speaking specifically of the claim by James Lukatsky, who was one of the people that helped design the OSAP program and ran it for the DIA. He when he was there, he had at the ranch, he had an experience happen that he couldn't explain. And when he went home, some of the things that have been described as being witnessed at the Skinwalker Ranch, all of a sudden his kids and his wife were seeing upright wolfmen and orbs, real bright orbs that would go through their house. He brought it all back to the East Coast. And then 5 guys that were each from a different, I think, branch of the intelligence services, they all came back with hitchhikers too. One of them really got kind of mentally challenged.
It reminds me of the dogs that are upright in trench coats smoking cigarettes.
Well, I love those guys. Those are like classic tricksters. I tell you what, that is so classic.
Yeah, Snoop Dogs.
Right. Hansen calls these things idioplastic, basically. That means that they conform to the beliefs and the needs and the wants and the expectations of the observer person.
Right.
And I've noticed that in my own research. That's what sort of got me going down this road. It's like, wait a minute. Did I have any role in this? They're either watching me or I'm have some role in triggering it. And Chris, I know you considered the same stuff, it's odd to talk about it, but it's even odder to have it happen. But it's just hints that somehow it's conforming to what you are expecting it to do. And so that
as soon as you open your mouth and start to talk about it, it changes to the opposite.
Right. So it's the darndest thing. But so what I think if you accept the idea that ufology is going to go into a consciousness realm in terms of trying to understand the so-called UFO, then I think people working the consciousness angle must take into consideration the idea that Gaia itself is conscious.
Yeah.
And that's the consciousness, that's the context.
Superorganism.
That everything else, our brains, our subconscious minds, our conscious minds are all operating in that context. So we can't just say, well, it's human consciousness did this, that, and the other in a quantum experiment.
So, David, I take it you're familiar with the term Telerik Currents?
Yeah. Explain it to me. Are these are okay? No, I'm not really.
It's like Devereaux land.
Well,
it's like
Earth currents, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, yeah. I'm vaguely familiar with ley lines and the currents and Persinger's work and Devereaux and whatnot. But so once you start looking at the Earth as a living organism that has its own purpose, consciousness, sentience, possibly self-awareness. It has a plan, and for life, and its plan is always to create the ideal and optimum conditions for all forms of life to exist and prosper. And that means keeping the environment just exactly in homeostasis, they call it, which is.
And if it doesn't work, I wipe you out and we try it again.
Right. But so I think
the Gaia is also an extinction driving machine.
Yeah, it does what it has to do. It's like we were talking, honey badger don't care. That's its nature, you know. If it has to weed you out, it'll weed you out if it needs to. But
I've often thought about that idea, David, about the Earth being a conscious organism, planets, or especially stars being sentient.
Yeah.
Because I'm a science fiction writer, these ideas just sort of come and go, but that's one that stuck with me for a long time.
Oh, it's a great one.
I do want to go ahead and bring in my mod, Antiderivative Jill. Hello, Jill.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing all right.
She's living long and prospering.
That's right.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
There you go.
Every word you say makes me appreciate your presence here today.
Yes,
I like
you
your
guys are,
scientific method.
You guys have a lot of fans in the chat.
Oh,
and
that's nice to
speaking
hear.
of fans in the chat, Jill, do we have our spinner wheel ready to go for an autographed copy of Stalking the Herd?
Yes, we do.
All right, let's check it out. All right,
Oh, this is really exciting.
let's go ahead and give her a spin.
Oh, it's making me dizzy. I'm getting mesmerized by it now.
There it goes.
Oh,
Yay!
The spinner.
Jill, congratulations.
That's awesome.
Thank
That
you.
is awesome.
Yeah,
She's
out of
going
all
to
the
love that.
Win. I'm glad I won this one.
And we're also going to give away an Into the Fringe t-shirt, much like the one that I'm wearing. So if we can do another spin, we'll ask that person to email me with their information, including their t-shirt size and their mailing address. And while Jill spins, I will put my email address on the chat.
I need a moment to help my daughter.
Sure.
I'll be right back.
No worries. And I'm proud to say, gentlemen, that we have the largest audience in the chat. This is a record-breaking number of people for Into the Fringe.
Cool.
Awesome. That is
So
great.
this is a topic that people are very interested in, and so I really hope that we can have you guys back.
It's
Wow.
pretty rare that David and I, for various reasons, have ever really done any shows together. We've only done a couple, 3, which is surprising to me. But trying to get this guy to get out and in front of people sometimes it's not easy.
Well, I give these lectures and people hold their head like their heads are going to explode.
Well, yeah.
And it's like, maybe I got the wrong message. Yeah, I don't know. But
Yeah.
I talk to UFO groups and they sit there like they're having the worst migraine they've ever had. It's like,
It's funny that you should say that. I used to put on UFO lectures here in town, Stanton Friedman and all different kinds of people, and you're absolutely right. They'll sit there and just, look like they're frozen.
right. They just don't know where to put it. Well, that's Chris and I talked about this all the time. Where do your listeners, your viewers, where do they file this kind of material? I don't even know for sure where I file it. Some mornings I wake up and think, oh, this is just nuts. this is just, some massive delusion. And then I go, no, it's not. It's not.
I guess I'd have to file it under P for paranormal.
Yeah, well, the paranormal, yeah, even that word is now coming under heat.
It's not accurate enough.
Well,
Yeah,
people, I was
that's
just
true.
I wrote a piece about let's see, who was it? Terence McKenna and Rupert Sheldrake. They were both. There was a couple of rants that they gave about we hate the paranormal. We want to crush it. The paranormal is intellectual pornography. Right. And I went, oh, okay. I want to see some more of that. So that's so they want what they want, and what I think most of people like us want is like just have it be normal. In other words, if you see a flying saucer, that's not paranormal. That's normal because you know what it is. Not necessarily an alien, but it could be one of these Earth manifestation things that's trying to send
like
us
the
some
one
message.
I saw right out in front of your house.
Yeah, right.
Before I
Jeez.
even knew you.
Right. That's yeah. I like the one that we stayed up all night up there on the mountain talking about flying saucers and all this, that, and the other. And we were like, oh, wow, all night. And then the next morning, the sheriff's wife calls me and says, did you know that there was like a giant light hovering over your house for about an hour last night? 3:30 in the morning. I didn't.
Oh, yeah. You always
And
love to hear that.
We were rocking and rolling.
We didn't. Nobody went out or nobody looked up. I don't know what happened there, but
we were rocking and rolling. I remember that was one of those philosophical nights, that just.
Oh, it was intense. And then just recently, her daughter had an amazing sighting on Back Roads Highway up there, and now she's kind of hooked into all this stuff. But she's more into and so was this deputy sheriff and his wife. They said it's extraterrestrials. Why are you going through all this rigmarole? They're here. It's like, well, yeah, I don't know. Maybe.
Okay. At this point, let's go ahead and give the wheel a spin for the T-shirt.
All right.
I love that noise.
Mm-hmm. Ooh.
All right. Congratulations, Loki.
Wow.
So, Loki, go ahead and send me your T-shirt size and your mailing address, and I'll put my email back up here. And that way I will know where to send it and what size to send. And yes, congratulations. Jill, I'd like to thank you very much for doing the honors tonight. And is there anything that you
You're
would
welcome.
like to say or ask of our guests before you go?
No, not at this time. But thank you guys very much for being on the show. Y'all were very interesting.
Thank you.
Indeed.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you, Jill. And that concludes our show. I know that we've barely scratched the surface on this topic. And as I said, we have broken a record tonight for the audience. So we're going to have you guys back.
Let's do it. So there's much more where this came from. I'll tell you what.
Oh,
Great. Sounds good.
We barely
Meanwhile-
licked the tip of the iceberg.
Meanwhile, buy Chris's books and read the forewords because whoever wrote those, it was awesome.
Yeah, David wrote the foreword to all five of my books.
Especially read Stalking the Herd because a lot of work went into that. That includes my files and a lot of files. And Chris correlated all this stuff for weeks and days and months and years. Got it all under
and
one
looking
cover.
forward to Mute Speak.
It is an amazing piece of work. It's just like the handbook for, you can't
Do
read
you
that
guys
book.
have an ETA for when Mute Speak will be out?
Yeah, at this point, we'd be lucky to get it out this year, but I'd like to get it out this year.
Yeah, we've got 250, 275 pages of transcript, but I really want to put the icing on the cake here, which is what we're aiming to do soon.
Right. Yeah, we still got a little work to do, but a lot of it is pretty tight and ready to go. So
cool. Well, we have a lot of people asking you to please come back, and so I will be in touch about that.
Yeah, let's do that.
And other than that, it is Cardinal Sin out.